Hi, I'm Bencia, and my economic case study will be advanced micro devices, better known as AMD. So, AMD was founded 52 years ago by Jerry Sanders, along with a few other ambitious Fairchild Semiconductor employees. Anyway, the company did not actually start out by creating their own products. Instead, they were manufacturing electronics and chips for other companies. But over time, as the company grew, they were eventually able to start developing their own products. AMD currently employs over 11,421 people, and they also sell globally, both to consumers and other manufacturers. For example, they sell their Radeon GPUs to clients such as Apple for their Macs. The company is also currently valued at $112 billion from Q4 of 2020. Over time, the only major players in the CPU market were AMD and Intel because all other competitors were either forced out of the industry or went out of business. Today's AMD's main competitors are Intel and Apple in the CPU department, Intel and NVIDIA in the desktop GPU department. So in both of these departments, AMD is sort of in an oligopoly type of market. For background, CPUs basically handle the basic tasks of a computer, and so that basically means that they run Windows, they run Mac OS, they run Google Chrome, they run whatever programs you use on a day-to-day basis. Some examples of CPUs you might find are Intel Core i3s, i5s, i7s, and i9s. They like to go by odd numbers, and same with AMD. They like to go with Ryzen 3, 5, 7, and 9. GPUs, on the other hand, sort of specialize on graphical tasks. So they basically make gaming computers by allowing these computers to pump out really high frames per second at high graphic settings because games tend to be more graphically demanding. And GPUs are also sometimes used for cryptocurrency. Some examples of GPUs would be GTX 1080s, RTX 3080s, both by NVIDIA, and for AMD, it would be like the RX 580 or 5700 XT. When it comes to dedicated graphics, AMD and NVIDIA are the only two contenders. And this is because Intel mostly does integrated graphics, which are part of their own CPUs. Without going too far into detail, AMD and Intel also create chipsets which are tied to their CPUs, and they basically just help computer parts communicate with each other. The global GPU market is currently valued at 20 billion, but is projected to grow to over 200 billion by the end of the decade. And the CPU market is currently valued at $83 billion. For market share, AMD has consistently trailed Intel for desktop CPUs and laptop CPUs, and for GPUs, they've also consistently trailed behind NVIDIA. The reason they trail behind NVIDIA is because they don't have as many supporting software as them, such as GeForce Experience and RTX Broadcast, both of which I don't have enough time to explain today, unfortunately. But in recent years, they've recently started taking back a lot of market share, thanks to the release of their new Ryzen line of processors that I'll go over later. The CPU and GPU markets are both extremely difficult to enter, and I'll explain why in a moment. For the CPU market, basically all software is written in x86, which is originally designed by Intel, and they licensed it out to AMD, which is why they're able to be somewhat successful in the CPU market. If you were to start your own CPU company, you'd basically be screwed because you'd have to try to get a license from Intel in order to even get the rights to x86. So basically, most software nowadays is written on the x86 platform. So basically, if you wanted other software to work on your processor, you'd have to make your processor be on x86. If not, no companies will want to support your platform because nobody uses it, and no one wants to use your processor because no software supports it. The only company to recently break into the market is Apple, and the only reason they were able to succeed without using x86 is because they had the resources to develop a sort of translator for x86 instructions into ARM, which is the platform that their new line of M1 chips that you find in their new MacBooks are on. Some of the main reasons that's really hard to break into the GPU market, besides the hardware compatibility issues, is driver support. Not every company has the resources to make drivers, and a quick explanation of what drivers are basically, they basically allow your operating system to recognize your computer parts. Companies such as NVIDIA and AMD also are also popular enough that game companies will go out of their way to optimize their games for your cards and stuff. But if you were to try to make your own company that sold graphics cards, nobody would want to buy them. Buy them because no games would be optimized for those graphics cards. As for externalities, AMD's products has made it easier for people to access the internet, and computers have gotten a lot more powerful since they re-entered the CPU market around 2017. As for negatives, AMD has relied on questionable suppliers for the raw materials that are used to manufacture their products. For example, they would rely on armed groups in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Africa to basically supply them with the raw materials needed to create their products. And the AMD's graphics cards are also used to mine cryptocurrency, which is known to use a lot of energy. AMD's positive impacts on employment. So AMD currently employs over 11,000 employees, and development of computers has also created a lot of new jobs thanks to emerging technologies such as research into machine learning, content creation, such as YouTubers, streamers on Twitch, and also online advertising. Unemployed people can also be easily connected to opportunities that are across the country thanks to the internet, and remote workers can also boost local economies. Machines that aid workers have also significantly increased worker productivity, such as autopilot on planes, making it easier for pilots to do their jobs. For negative impacts on employment, automation is pushing wages of lower end jobs down, and even skilled jobs such as driving are are kind of threatened by technological advancements because of self-driving vehicles, but those are still in the early stages. Before I go into business strategies, I need to go over some background information. So basically, die processes are basically the amount of computing power you can cram into a certain amount of space. So the smaller die process you have, the better it is. So after 2007, Intel sort of adopted a new strategy that some like to call tick-tock, but it involves like Intel shrinking its die process every 1 or 2 years. This effectively gave Intel a giant advantage in the CPU market and sort of gave them a monopoly. Because of this dominance, Intel sort of also became complacent. So for one, they assumed that consumers only needed 4 processing cores. And processing cores are basically individual processing units within CPUs, and they basically just allow computers to multitask and run tasks simultaneously. And Intel's also hit a bit of a snag on it, upgrading from its 14 nanometer die process down to 10 nanometer/7 nanometer. So they ran into some production issues, which has sort of prevented them from moving forward. So for AMD's business strategies, so some of the things that allowed them to be that enabled their revival was that they recognized the benefits of more processing cores than just 4. So when they re-entered the market in 2017, their 1700X processor, which cost about $300. For reference, in 2016 or 2017, Intel's 8-core processors cost over $1,000. So that basically allowed them to take the CPU market by storm. These CPUs that they released in 2017 all go under the Ryzen lineup, but there's also the EPYC lineup for enterprise and companies and stuff, but they're kind of irrelevant for the average person. As boring as it may sound, I believe that AMD's key to success is just not being complacent in the CPU market because the bar is just set that low by Intel. They're still making big jumps in terms of single core performance on their CPUs each and every year with each new generation, and they're also rapidly entering the laptop market, which they started doing last year. And here are my sources.